Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's IFSEC webinar. I hope everyone is keeping safe and well. I'm James Moore, editor of IFSEC Global, and I'll be your host today. And also a quick thank you to our headline sponsor for today, Hanwha TechWin. This is part of our IFSEC Digital Week program taking place this week, and it's the second of two webinars today. We had a fantastic session this morning as we heard from Dr. Dave Sloggett and the UK and Wales Surveillance Camera Commissioner, Tony Porter, on the state of security and surveillance in the UK, while we were also joined by Mike Redditon from the BSIA, Rick Malfield from the Security Institute, and Alex Carmichael from the SSAIB for a panel debate. If you missed it, not to worry, all this week's sessions will soon be available on demand for you to listen to at your leisure. You can also follow all the latest by searching the hashtag IFSECDigital on social media. While in the resource section, you'll find a link to the main IFSEC Digital Week page with a variety of content to download and watch. So, on to this afternoon's session. Here, we'll be discussing the protection of critical national infrastructure during challenging times. This topic relates to what for many is a major highlight of the IFSEC International event each year, where we usually host the LPCB attack testing zone with live test sessions demonstrating some of the most effective physical security equipment in the industry. A topic that is of paramount importance across the world, given the current situation, I'm sure you'll agree. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and you can see the agenda here on your screen. We have 4 presenters today who I'll shortly hand over to, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to them for their time. We'll then move on to a Q&A session following. Just a few housekeeping announcements to make from me, and we'll then get going. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of our presentation. For the Q&A session, if there is a specific speaker you are aiming a question at, please do highlight it in the question, as this will make the session a smoother process. If we can't answer all the questions live, we'll put them to the speakers after this webinar and put together an article on IFSEC Global in the weeks following, so be sure to keep a lookout for that. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and for the best experience, it is advised to use the Google Chrome browser when viewing this webinar. Near the end of our webinar, we will ask you to complete our survey found in the widgets below. Please take a quick minute to fill this out before leaving us today, as your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. Finally, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the Help widget found at the bottom of your screen, or simply type your issue into the Q&A area and we will look to offer our assistance. Now, on to the presentation. The speakers on your screen will all be discussing today's topic, with each covering different aspects of the protection of critical national infrastructure, as well as the importance of accredited testing for products in this field. As I mentioned, you can view the full speaker bios from your dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen, but I'll just do a quick introduction for each. Richard Flint is the Physical Security Technical and Business Development Manager at BRE Global. Richard is one of the UK's leading experts in physical security standards, having over 23 years of experience managing testing and certification of security products at the Loss Prevention Certification Board. John Barty is the R&D and Technical Manager at Technicover. John has over 21 years of experience in CAD design and manufacture, with more than 16 years specialising in asset product design and innovation in the area of physical security and asset protection. Russell Whitway, Business Development Manager at Barker Fencing, joined the business in 2003 to open up the company's fastener division. After 25 years in the sector, having spent the last 15 years in marketing and development within the physical security market. And finally, Ian Moran, Sales and Marketing Director at ATG Access, has had an extensive and very successful career with ATG and specialises in urban security within public realm regeneration schemes across the UK, Australia, Canada and America. Finally, just a quick introduction to HS Security Group, of which the speakers from Technicover, Barker Fencing and ATG Access are all part of, and a big thank you for them today for joining us. HS Security is a group of companies owned by Hill & Smith Holdings plc, who specialise in highly advanced physical security solutions. As leaders in physical security engineering and with a global reach powered by strong partnerships, HS Security highlights it will deliver effective, holistic security solutions. Encompassing all the brands you can see here, the group can support customers by offering one place to get the whole physical security package. We'll begin first, however, with a presentation from Richard Flint from BRE Global on the testing work carried out by the LPCB. Richard, Over to you.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And a big thank you to IFSEC for hosting today's seminar, as well as today's sponsors. I'm honoured to be invited to discuss the issue of protecting CNI during challenging times. But what do we mean by challenging times? While COVID-19 has certainly resulted in many significant challenges to us all, I'll be exploring the challenges faced by those protecting our critical infrastructure from those challenges posed by criminals, terrorists and other hostile actors who wish to do harm irrespective of the virus. I have been involved, as James said, in physical security testing and certification for over 23 years. And during that time, it is safe to say 95% of the products I've seen be tested have failed to deliver the performance expected by the manufacturers who submit them. Thankfully, we expose those vulnerabilities in the laboratory setting before those designs ever reach the market. However, what about the many thousands of security products that aren't submitted for testing and certification? Can you trust them to deliver? Surely it is too late to learn whether they provide the protection expected once that product is deployed in theatre. We will therefore be focusing our attention on the challenges faced by those attempting to protect our critical infrastructure from hostile actions. We will explore the alternative threats posed and consider how those responsible for securing people and critical assets can do so confidently, safe in the knowledge that the equipment they are investing in will deliver the protection they require. We'll also hear from representatives of a number of manufacturers who have invested significantly in third-party testing, sharing many of the lessons they have learned and the benefits they have experienced. So why is it important? Well, as the RA announced after they bombed the Conservative Party conference in October 1984, you have to be lucky all of the time. We only have to be lucky some of the time. We simply do not know when, where, or how the enemy will strike, and we cannot afford to take the chances. What we will be discussing today is how you can set about ensuring the protective measures you will invest in will be effective at protecting against the hostile actions you and those that advise you have identified as being a threat. While crowded places have become the focus of low technology terrorist attacks, we have long recognised hostile actors will target assets likely to cause a large impact, assets such as those forming part of our critical infrastructure. It is therefore important we continue to invest in protecting the infrastructure we rely on. This will help to ensure we can continue to access drinking water when we turn on the tap, we can turn on a light when it is dark, and our healthcare workers can travel to their places of work safely and save lives, while those responsible for their security go about the work ensuring the measures implemented are effective. So let us not become complacent, and let us not forget what we may otherwise consider to be yesterday's challenges. COVID-19 has not replaced the intent shared by those who wish to do us harm. COVID-19 has simply added to the challenges we face. Now, before we explore some of the threats you may face, it is important to remember the importance of good advice. While I will attempt to analyse some of the threats you may face, it is important to seek the very best threat advice available to you. Those of us in the UK listening today have access to some of the world's best advisors on security-related threat. CPNI, NCSC and NACSO all provide first-class threat advice, supported by networks of advisors. The UK is also home to an amazing number of highly talented security consultants, members of the Security Institute and ARSLIS, as well as those who have received SABRE registered professional status, deliver first-class security consulting services. Meanwhile, standards underpin the delivery of the protective measures based on that advice. Those standards, plus the testing and certification we and others such as MARA conduct, help to ensure the protective measures you can invest in will deliver the protection required to mitigate the threats identified. However, in order to provide a reliable measure of performance, it is vitally important those standards you rely on address the intended actions of those we are defending against. So let's consider what actions a hostile actor may take to target you and compromise your assets. Hostile actors want to be successful. In that sense, they're no different from business people. Whether they are criminal, terrorist, activists, or others, they don't want to fail. Terrorism wouldn't be very terrorizing if they repeatedly failed in their objectives. This was something the head of Al-Qaeda reminded his followers a few years ago. Like any successful entrepreneur, hostile actors will pursue a return if they perceive its value outweighs the investment required to realize that return, and if they believe they can manage the risks involved in being successful. So if we turn that on its head, by increasing the investment required and the risks faced by those wanting to do harm to a point that we call the tipping point, at which they are deterred from targeting our assets. This is because they will perceive it as simply not worth attempting. So what return are intruders looking to achieve? A thief will generally be financially motivated. However, a terrorist, activist, or protester's motives are quite different. They are typically looking to gain publicity for the cause that they're fighting for, albeit they go about achieving that publicity in different ways. So let's consider two examples of terrorist incidents from entrepreneurial perspective. So, yes, very sadly, in July 2011, Anders Breivik murdered scores of people in Oslo and Donatoya, causing much pain and generating many years of media attention. In order to achieve his objective, Breivik invested considerable time and money acquiring the materials he required. And he did everything he could to conceal his plans until the last minute. Breivik set out to achieve what he considered to be a large return. He was willing to invest a lot of money and time to achieve it, while working tirelessly to mitigate the risks that would have otherwise potentially led to failure. This is an example of a relatively high-tech, high-investment attack on the entrepreneurial scale. On the other hand, the callous murder of Fusilier Rigby was a relatively low-tech attack, sadly the first of many such attacks we have seen since. The attackers invested very little and exposed themselves to minimal risks during the lead-up to their attack. They used a vehicle and relatively easily concealed bladed weapons to strike with the element of surprise. As we know, this sadly resulted in the untimely death of a much-loved and respected member of the British Armed Forces. However, the ensuing media attention ensured the terrorist message of hate was conveyed far and wide. And we've since a number of other low-tech attacks involving a mix of vehicles and bladed weapons, items that are relatively easy to acquire and prepare compared to those selected by Breivik. Why is that? Well, we believe it is because the return on the minimal investment and the risks involved is considered worth it by the hostile actors. So what about other methods by which they may use to target people and infrastructure we need to protect? Well, starting at the top or just below the top with the cyber, a cyber attack could result in major long-lasting ramifications. However, not everyone is capable of mounting a cyber attack. In fact, I just about know how to kick my computer if it doesn't work. The average person wishing to conduct a cyber attack would need to invest time and money to do so. However, the ability to conduct such attacks remotely almost certainly draws the attention of those more capable of carrying out such attacks, as they do so while exposing themselves to relatively low risk. So what about those considering using explosives? Well, thankfully, certainly in the UK, explosives and the precursor chemicals they may otherwise rely on attract a great deal of attention from our police and intelligence services. Therefore, while their use could potentially deliver a significant return, those considering using them face relatively considerable risks and investment doing so. This will tend to act to deter them, especially if they perceive other methods are more likely to achieve their objectives. Likewise, UK firearms laws make it relatively difficult for a terrorist to acquire a firearm and certainly raise the risks of being identified and apprehended compared with, for example, acquiring a bladed weapon. As we know, COVID-19 has had a huge effect on our lives. This will not have gone unnoticed amongst those wishing to do us harm on a mass scale. It is therefore vitally important we continue to invest in the very best levels of security for our medical research and other facilities where pathogens, toxins and radiological materials are handled or stored. Those security measures significantly increase the investment likely to be needed to illegally acquire such materials and the risks a hostile actor would need to take in order to be successful. So what about the threat of forced entry using hand tools? While we may not perceive it to be at the top of a terrorist list of likely MOs, such attacks could result in significant harm to our society and may even result in significant loss of life. And yet, if we do not invest in appropriate protection, such attacks may require relatively limited investment and may involve relatively lower risks compared with a number of other MOs we have listed. It is therefore important we do not become complacent and forget about what some may consider to be an old threat. So let's now consider the threat of manual forced entry in more detail and how we can successfully mitigate against such threats. Forced entry can take a number of views. There are a number of ways in which a hostile actor may attempt to achieve unauthorized entry onto a site, other than relying on deception or acting as an insider. They may attempt to force their way in, with little regard to making noise. In such cases, their objective is to overcome the barriers presented to them as quickly as possible. Such methodologies are covered by standards such as LPS 1175, UK government standards, and the high resistance classes in EN 1627 lying between RC4 and RC6. Alternatively, an intruder may wish to gain entry by stealth. This is more akin to the actions of an intruder who has a lower expectation of return. They wish to minimize the risks involved in committing the act and will therefore tend to use small, easily concealed tools and methods unlikely to generate much noise. Standards such as PAS 24, LPS 2081 and EN 1627 up to RC3 deal with this threat, as do the standards I've mentioned earlier. And finally, some hostile actors may choose to use the cover of a civil disturbance to gain access. Standards like the Department of State and ASTM standards in America attempt to deal with such threats, while others may wish to access your site surreptitiously. Irrespective of which one this is, it is important to recognise and understand the differences between these types of forced entry attack and to ensure the standards you specify are tailored to the threats you face. So how can we protect our sites against forced entry? Effective protection against forced entry requires investment in measures that delay an intruder while the intrusion is detected and responded to, as shown on this triangle. However, I have sadly all too often witnessed asset owners and advisors agreeing to substitute effective delay measures such as doors, shutters, grills and other barriers with detection measures that might tell you something's happening but aren't necessarily delaying while you respond to it. The result of that is we get an exploitable gap, which in itself is likely to result in your asset being compromised. If you do not invest enough in your delay measures, there will be a gap, and by the time they've detected and you've responded to that detection, they are long gone, or have been successful in their aims and objectives. That said, it is important to ensure intrusion detection is placed as early as possible. For example, using PIDs or perimeter detection systems and sterile zone detection to pick up an authorized approach to a building. And please don't leave your assets as vulnerable as the average home. Sitting in mine right now, as I know many of you will be as well, and thinking about the PIR systems that I have in my house, they may pick up on an intruder, but to be honest, they'll only pick them up once they've got through my doors or my windows, and by then all the delay measures of my house have been breached. It's also to remember that little piece of kit called an alarm transmission equipment. That must also be reliable and have appropriate fault reporting settings that don't significantly increase the response time to an incident. And finally, it's important that the response matches the designed threat. Therefore, if you're designing your site to resist a pair of attackers using petrol-driven tools, it is equally important to ensure your response to that threat is capable of handling it. So we consider our site from a thief's perspective. They want to approach it, get to an asset at the core and get away and off to the objective, as you can see on the right-hand side. During phase one, they'll plan their crime. They'll pick tools that they can transfer to the site that they feel they can conceal until they get there, but they also feel will be effective at gaining access to the asset they are after quickly enough before the response arrives. And they'll also plan in doing so without leaving any evidence. However, sadly, when it comes to terrorists, we don't have the advantage of the full delay across the bottom of the triangle. To be honest, in many cases, once they've crossed your threshold, their publicity and what they're after has started. So every effort needs to be placed in putting that delay as high up as possible, or then using other delay measures within your premises to mitigate and reduce how far into your environment they manage to get. The delay provided by physical barriers is critical to site security. Ultimately, the delay measures you invest in play a vital role in preventing hostile actors from gaining access to your people and assets while you detect and respond to their actions. However, as I suggested and mentioned earlier, 95% of products sadly failed to deliver the delay that might have been expected. So how can you be confident in the security products you rely on? Who can you trust, and what claims can you trust? These are the typical claims over 20 years I've heard many say, but thankfully it's tended to move round clockwise towards at least claims that refer to a standard, and in increasing time, certainly in the UK, go well beyond it, as we'll explore in a second. At the bottom of our assurance curve, we have self-declaration. It's not measurable, it provides a low level of assurance and a high level of risk. These are claims such as the one made by the person we have just seen. However, if we use standards, they provide a means by which acceptable levels of performance may be identified and describe the manner in which that performance is measured, so we all know what we're talking about. And as we go up the scale from there, we eventually get to third-party testing and certification. I'll let my colleagues talk about that later. With so many alternative standards available, it is vitally important to consider which best suit the threats you're wishing to mitigate. So let's now look at some of the factors you need to consider. As we explored earlier, we must ensure a hostile actor's perception of investment and risks involved outweigh the return they hope to achieve. So what investments are they likely to be willing to make? Well, for example, how many people will they invest in committing the act? And of those, how many will actually use tools to achieve entry during an attack? From what we've seen, most criminal gangs will rely on a single person within the gang to gain entry. While others may be involved in committing the crime, they tend to have alternative roles. For example, others act as a lookout, warding off Mrs. Miggins if she approaches with a handbag. Meanwhile, others may be sitting at the wheel of the getaway vehicle. That said, in some cases, where they consider the return to be worth it and the extra investment involved, a gang may be willing to allocate more members to the role of gaining entry. Hatton Garden springs to mind. So what tools will they use? Well, intruders generally select tools according to the following: how effective they perceive them to be, how easy they can acquire them without being detected, how easy they can transport those tools, and how easy they can conceal them when they're approaching their target. And in these images, and unfortunately I was unable to play it as a video, and sadly many of you have had the opportunity in previous Mays in the last few years to see this done live at IFSEC. We have Tom, our apprentice, who walks onto scene carrying a number of tools, but hopefully you can see in the left-hand image, apart from the fact he didn't do the best job of hiding the knife and a tire lever, as we move across to the right image and he clears and empties out his pockets and his pants, we get to see how many tools Tom is actually able to conceal about his person. and is surprisingly easy for someone to conceal quite an array of tools. And as these images illustrate, Tom was able to conceal the majority of tools that we use within our LPS 1175 SR3 toolkit. This selection of tools are not only highly effective at gaining entry through many doors and other security features around the building, they could do quite a bit of harm to those within the building. It is therefore important not to assume hostile actors cannot permeate into your facility carrying quite a considerable array of tools, unless you have invested in appropriate intervention measures and managed risks to such tools, managed access to such tools within your secure environment. We need to also consider how much noise the intruder is willing to make. What are their expectations of the response to them making any noise? We've certainly seen criminals become more brazen in recent years. If they think they can use techniques that generate lots of noise in order to achieve their objective far quicker, and maybe with scaring those around them off, they will. An example of this is the type of attack we typically see on jewellers, where criminals use sledgehammers and other tools to force their way through the window or into the shop very quickly and very brazenly. And finally, it is important to note that the perception of criminals will spend longer to attack a facility using larger tools is somewhat now outdated. They are actually, in our experience, far more likely to select larger, more powerful tools to achieve entry quicker if they believe they can get those tools to site. And this is one of the key principal driving factors behind the significant changes made to the 1175 standard at the beginning of last year. LPS 1175 indicates the investment required to compromise a barrier based on the tools and time required to overcome them. LPS 1175 also indicates the level of risk a hostile actor may need to take in order to overcome those barriers. It takes into account the size and concealability of the tools they might use, the noise those tools generate, and the time a hostile actor may be willing to spend attempting to achieve their objective without fear of being apprehended. Not all forced entry standards provide such a comprehensive indication of a barrier's performance and the degree to which its use may deter a hostile actor. So what other considerations do we need to make? Well, how accessible is the standard that you're going to use? For example, is it available free of charge, and is it accessible to all within the supply chain? Do those wishing to access and use the standard need to pay for it, as is the case for British, European, ISO and ASTM standards? Alternatively, is the standard simply not available to those that need to reference it? Does the standard scope cover the types of product being considered? Does the standard cover the nature of the threat you're concerned about? Can you easily verify claims of conformity with that standard to ensure that the products supplied meet the standard? And are there mechanisms in place to support the evaluation of deviations to scope and modifications to the product so you're not left to buy at risk? So in conclusion of the first part of today's seminar, please seek threat advice from appropriate sources such as CPNI, NCSC, NACSO, or the like in your own countries around the world. Please remember that deterrence will be achieved when hostile actors consider the investment and risk outweighs their likelihood and the likely return. The delay provided by physical barriers is critical to site security. However, not all products are capable of delivering the performance claimed. It is therefore vitally important to select products that meet appropriate threat-based standards such as 1175 and ensure products are covered by third-party certification through a recognised body such as LPCB. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll take questions during the Q&A session scheduled for the end of the seminar. In the meantime, I'm delighted to hand over to John Barty at Technicover.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My section of today's presentation is to explain why independent testing is so important and the systems and measures in place by people like LPCB and CPNI with regard to certification, so important for end users, specifiers, and the general public safety. So, as alluded to earlier in Richard's point, unsurprisingly, it's only a small proportion of new products pass the severe testing the first time they're put through. And as we've been a manufacturer with LPCB for in excess of 20 years, and I myself have been working with them with testing for in excess of 15, and I still suffer the 95% success rate that Richard alluded to earlier with regard to putting new products into the market, arriving at testing and subjecting it to that physical attack test by that independent body. What the testing and certification of the products do to 1175, it assures the specifiers of consistent levels of quality. So wherever the physical security is needed, you can rely that the certification stands. That badge is key. The essentials to specifying reliable and cost-effective solutions are for long-term operational resilience. So the high-security physical access solutions are the backbone to a resilient business. And it's often the last line of defence, shielding a critical asset or restricted area. Equipment must come with robust assurance it will perform as required and if subjected to the assessed risk of a criminal attack or infiltration by unauthorised personnel. LPCB third-party approval provides a rigorously tested security performance for a full range of risk levels. Richard said earlier on, and there's crossover between our presentation, terrorists and criminals only have to be lucky some of the time, and we have to be lucky all of the time. And as part of that statement, certified product removes the need of luck. It comes down to a physical product has been tested and will achieve the standards. So earlier on Richard's triangles, it referenced to the sort of delay and the deter. And again, selecting force entry protection standards is about investment and risk outweighing return. And that's back to tools and working time and having a barrier that's in place that will deter hostile actors from even attempting to. Or if they do attempt to, it gives you such a delay that's measured and will give you time to respond. So within LPS 1175, there are incremental threat levels. Richard showed you some of the tools earlier on and some images. And the scale is defining the security rating as to what your threat is. What is the threat to the asset? The standard ranges from the tool categories from A to H, and on the graphic you can see it details about from A being very low level, opportunist attack, very small tools, something that could be hidden in a large sport jacket with a couple of large deep pockets, and as the levels increase, you can see that the size of the tools, the impact that they have, and also the mindset of the individuals carrying out the attack changes. So as you go through up to B, again, it's still, you could hide them inside a person, and Richard showed the image earlier of one of the test operatives hiding quite some severe tools. Once you get up to sort of D+, we're talking about an experienced, determined attack, someone who's turning up with one goal, and that's to attack the product. In order to do that, they have to bring some severe tools with them. And to do so, you would need a large sports bag, ranging up to, as the image portrays, a very large van, because the tools are vast. So as we move on to the next slide, you see as the security ratings improve from A to B to C through to H, you can see the visual there of how the tools increase from very minor hand tools at A all the way through to looking at H, where you've got petrol cutters, you've got pneumatic units, thermal lances. There's such a large tooling category there. And as the tools increase, they also include all their previous levels. So by choosing level H as your security threat, you include all of the tools listed before, are all part of that kit. So it's incremental, and you can see that the size of vehicle needed to carry all of these would be vast. So within Hillsmith Securities, we have a range of security products ranging from sort of SR1, the very low level, all the way up to SR5. And these are due to a balance of both time and tools. A low-level toolkit with a limited time, up to a higher-level toolkit and longer time attack. These levels increase, obviously, with the asset and with guidance taken from what's needed with your specifier at your end, and also operational needs, and also an understanding of what the risk is. So this table here is about the security ratings defined in 1175. So on the left-hand side of the table, you can see your threat level, which is your tools. So what type of tools are going to be used to attack the asset? And then across the bottom of the table, you can see the delay in time required. So under the new issue 8 guidance, there can be a selection of your tool and then your time resistance to build a varying layers of protection to an asset. This next slide shows an example of, I said tool category here is being given as D. So, but the fence offers a minute's resistance, the outer door offers a 5 minutes resistance, and the inner door offers a 10 minutes resistance, resulting in a D1 security rating, a D5, and a D10, equating to 16 minutes of resistance for that one particular toolkit. So the tools included in D, such as hooligan bars, power tools, drills, jigsaws, all of those tools are used to attack each of those layers. And then the resistance gives you that total build-up of time. So it builds up to that total delay. Other standards, unlike 1175, don't give you that same continuation of the threat of attack. So here we've got an example of sort of ASTM and some EN 1627, that they cannot be able to certify each individual asset coming through, or the standards vary. So the tools change, or the attack logic changes. And because of that, you can't get an end time, a confidence in an end time that allows you to say, if the hostiles turned up with a set of tools, the whole asset would resist this level. So certification against 1175 gives you a confidence that by determining your threat level and your tools, you can build your time up to give you the delay you need. So very similar to Richard's slide earlier, ranging from sort of self-declaration through to testing, through to certification. And this is all about the confidence. Self-declaration is a man telling you how good something is. So you could use an analogy of an MOT for a car, that it's something that must happen. It must be tested and you must get a certificate for it, because that's what the guidelines state. That gives you the confidence to understand that that vehicle is to the levels needed to be roadworthy. And the same applies to security products. Self-declaration is, as some of the comments Richard used earlier, is an individual telling you his door or fence or security product is secure, it is anti-vandal, it is anti-tamper, but that doesn't give you the assurance that you need. So when you move on to testing, and then when you go through the testing process, it builds up your assurance. You put a product in front of some independent bodies who have got a guidance and a standard, tools that are recorded, and they carry out the testing. In carrying out the testing, you're again looking at building up that assurance and that confidence of the security effectiveness of the product. Following on from the testing, you move on to the certification. And that is about ensuring that the product that's being put in front and all the accessories and varying features that may be needed are included in that certification scope. So that it's not a one-off, it's a continual deliverable of a product that meets that exacting test requirement and the certification required. As well as that, moving on from certification, what LPCB also provide is a continual audit process. So for ourselves, when we've developed a product and we've put it to market, the continual certification is audited on that performance criteria required by that third party. Comes from the design element, which is early on, the testing element, which is a part of the certification process, then the end use and how it runs through the marketplace, but also the quality inspection. So with third-party assurance, it's not just about the product that's tested, it's about the continual systems in place that we have within businesses and LPCB auditors. They audit us twice yearly to assess that the products that we're still supplying to the marketplace are still as robust and as security effective as the original test sample. So with the LPCB and the mark of effective security, it's a badge that gives the confidence to the end users that they are, when the product states and is certified, they know it will withstand the attacks needed. So for inspection of the mark, the Red Book Live is a website that covers anybody who's had a product listed by LPCB, and the Red Book Live is listed on that Red Book, on that website. And what that gives you is end users a source to go and review individual manufacturers' products, to search what products are available to you, and to assess if they have the requirements in sizing and features that you need. It's updated daily, and it's easily accessible to all. It's a search tool, and it's a fantastic method to allow any end users and specifiers to investigate the products being offered to the market to ensure it is certified, and that when people are saying that they've got the badge or they've been through the test process, if it's not on the LPCB Red Book Live, it's not been certified. So along with the certificate that goes online and that we get as a manufacturer, we also include variations to cover maximum and minimum size scopes of products, because we all understand that when we test a particular product, when it goes into the marketplace, they vary from site to site and asset to asset. So as part of the certification, we always ensure that on the certificate we detail minimum and maximum sizes, performance criteria of the lock, so minimum lock condition and optimum lock conditions, operational needs, as well as all the accessories that are required as part of that certificate. So that when you build up a product in front of yourself, as you add more features or you have certain requirements, the operational needs, they do not detract from the certificate scope. So as an example, there is an LPCB certificate of one of Technicovers. And these are items that can be accessed online at the Red Book Live and downloaded. And they, along with within the test standard, there's lots of other details on those. Any caveats that are applied to the product, there's details around, as it says on here, locking accessories, the type of substrates, certain conditions of use, that will give that end user that confidence, and that specifies the confidence that by looking at the certificate and understanding by specifying the product certified, you are getting something which will offer the resistance you need without any flaws or voids. So the additional benefits of using LPS standards, the 1175 is a free document, so everyone can investigate the standard and assess its validity and how they could use it. All products meeting 1175 are on the one place, as I mentioned earlier, on the Red Book Live. There's 750 products certified to 1175 to date, and it's continually updated as more and more product portfolios get put forward, and Technical have an ongoing R&D program, as do all of the manufacturers, in developing more products and providing news as security needs change. And they're adaptable to national threats. Because the standard is a tool threat and a time threat, the adaptable to national threats, so as an example we've got on this slide here, the Royal Oman Police specified it, and Technicover has provided international products of security nature to America. We do work in Europe, we're doing work in the Middle East, all against this one standard because it is so clear and concise. So as an example here, there's some final images to show as a standard asset and a site that would be required, those layers of resistance, from an outer fence to some outer doors to access hatches to enclosures that are within. So those guidance, that whole asset can all be certified to 1175 to a determined threat level. And then you can build your time up as required to meet your need. On that note, I will hand you over to my colleague, Russell Ridgway from Barker's Fencing, who will discuss the inherent challenges of protecting CNI products. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Richard and John, for that insight to LPS 1175. As you can see, it's a detailed program of testing, and it gives you the knowledge and understanding that you will get a certified. The majority of you in this audience will, without doubt, understand your operational requirements of your particular sites and assets. From our point of view as manufacturers supplying equipment to you, we need to understand what you're trying to do, where you're coming from, so we can advise you with the product range, not necessarily our products, but various other products there. So when we're looking at this, we always come back to the main reoccurring message within the CNI sector, which is basically the terrorist or the attacker has to be lucky once, you have to be lucky all of the time. So what are the threats we're aiming to mitigate? Are you looking at the vulnerable aspects of your site, the valuable aspects of your site, or a high-risk part of the combination of the site? The threats can come from thieves, terrorism, state-sponsored, that's a government-led attack on your assets. What is the real threat? So with opportunities, vandals, and thefts, this can unwittingly cause major disruption to the networks that are involved. So a typical example of that is a thief breaking into a substation to try and steal copper. He could end up being electrocuted, injuring himself, killing himself, but he could end up putting up a vast majority of the UK network down just by his actions of trying to steal something. Another example is a vandal pushing a car onto a railway line. That vehicle derails a train. You could have a number of casualties, possibly deaths, but the disruption caused to that infrastructure is uncountable. And an incident similar to that led to the demise of rail track as it was at the time. Theft is part and parcel of that. Vehicle is a weapon. HVM in the last 2 decades has been very prevalent, and just more recently is the Bores, which my colleague Ian will explain a little bit more about that, because that is a particular area for ATG and it's an area that they're targeting. Specific targeted infrastructure, you will find there that that is basically a state-sponsored attack that is there to either cripple or destroy part of our infrastructure prior to a more major attack. Cyber, again, is something that's very prevalent, but we in the HS Security Group, we're all physical, so I'll leave that to the experts. Matching the requirements to the advice that we've been given, that's always difficult, because, as I say, you guys will know what you're doing. We've heard Richard and John mention return, investment and risk. This also applies to you as security managers who are looking at your site. Can you afford not to invest? What is the return of investing to protect your site? And what is the risk if you don't? So you've got to match your costs with expectations and make sure that what we can offer or what you're looking for on your asset is a cost-effective solution that ticks the boxes to get you to the accreditation that you need to get to. The aesthetics are always part and parcel of this. Security aspect is the driver, but you will always have to meet your client's requirements and also the local planner's requirements. On the right is a sort of diagram that we in the industry call an onion ring. Basically, it covers the holistic approach of what you need to look when you're looking to secure your particular asset. So you've basically got the various levels where you'll define what you're looking for, the detect and the reporting of bringing it all together of what you want. The support, when we say support, you've got to get finance to back you. You've got to agree a budget. You've got the purchasing teams. You've got to train them on what you're looking for so they understand it before it goes in to the distinct specifying stage and then the delivery stage. And one of the important things with the delivery is whatever the products that you've purchased, you've got to look at the longevity of it, how you dispose of it at the end of that, and what is the maintenance program that you've got to achieve as you go on. Providing the holistic approach is the way that Hill & Smith Security are looking at it. The group of businesses were all involved in physical security. But if you look at the little sketch that's attached to this slide, this is showing a data hall, but you could look at any facility, a nuclear power plant, a pharmaceutical manufacturing unit, or laboratory. There's whatever you're protecting has got an outer perimeter. From that perimeter, you go into the building envelope and you look at the various bits and pieces that you would use there. You've got the external services that need to be protected, the local protection within the building. So once you're in the building, you're going to protect there. So basically, you've got to look at the physical security in the layer that is there, and you've got to deter, delay, and detect. Again, that goes back to part of Richard's presentation earlier. When you come on to hostile vehicle mitigation, during the last 2 decades, this has become a major weapon of, unfortunately, the terrorists. And basically, VIBED, as it is now known with us, is vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. As you can see, there's various standards that this is compliant to. The majority of UK industry tested to pass the This is being superseded now by IWA 14, which is an international workshop agreement where countries got together, they realise what the threat is, and they're trying to mitigate against it. You've also got an ASTM standard, which is an American standard, and that product is used extensively in the USA and in the Middle East. Now, there's a varied range of products: fences, bollards, blockers, gates, street furniture, you name it. Got a whole host of things you can do. And what you're trying to do with a vehicle mitigation is create a standoff area. So your perimeter becomes that standoff area that then protects the infrastructure. The photograph to the right of that particular attack on an Afghan army base shows that the terrorists actually got inside there. So they got through the perimeter, they got to the centre, they exploded the device. It probably killed hundreds of people in there, and they destroyed the infrastructure. So the purpose of mitigation is to keep it away from the asset, i.e., if you keep at the perimeter, that's where we need to be with it. This is a video, and this is the only standalone product on the market. It's a palisade fence that we developed early in 2003 to meet the requirements that we were seeing coming through. Our team to basically have a look, see what we could do. A lot of the products using extensive civils work, whereas it's just a standard fence. It's a pretty standard things. This particular fence is a 3 metre high, and the actual post is only in the ground 1 metre on a standard footing. And when you look at that, for the 4x4 vehicle, it's very effective, and the vehicle just takes it off. 7.5 is in a moment. It's just the actual specification of the RCS 25. When we go on to the next part of the video, this is a development of the 25. The requirement we've seen that we need a 7.5 ton vehicle. Again, 30 miles an hour. It stops the vehicle with a penetration of about 3.5 meters. It's only half a meter above the fence, so it clears the fence by half a meter. So that's your penetration of 3.5 meters. When you're considering the perimeters, you probably don't need the speed protection that you would need on a entranceway where the roads, you can probably get vehicles up to a much higher speed. Hence, that's why the rating changes on each particular one. This is more going to physical attacks that we never make when we're looking at perimeters with people. Unfortunately, the video on the right didn't upload in time, and this shows basically a rapid deployable fence on some flat ground, and what the mob test here is trying to prove. But the officers can either break the fence, push the fence over, push the barrier over. Unfortunately for ourselves, neither so I can take my word for it, but we'll show the video at some time.
Everybody, please! video going?
Yeah.
That's the left-hand side. Come on the left.
Behind. And then we've got here.
Wobbly in the middle, that's about it.
You have with the other two organisations. And again, from the security group, fences, bollards, gates, turnstiles, external doors, external doors, etc. And there is a product name you need to create the way it's the key lesson is basically choices of manufacturer, understanding your operational requirements, what the local planning restrictions may be, understanding the deployment of the products available. So when you look at the picture to the right, that's for the CNI side. And on there you've got basically physical fence, sliding gates, PIDS fence, security cameras, bright light, security cabinets, security covers. So that entrance is really well protected, but it all talks to each other. So the PIDS, cameras, the light, they're all interactive. So if the light is set off, the PIDS might detect somebody coming in. So you've got to look at the whole interface, not just of the one product, i.e. the perimeter fence. It's how it operates with the rest of the infrastructure. The cost implications, unfortunately, when you look at CNI sites, the material that you've got to use to protect your site is more expensive than a standard fence or a standard gate or a standard bollard, but that's because it's doing a certain product, a particular job, and it is trying to stop terrorists, etc., to get in your premises. We try to blend it in, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. High security products look more robust, so as much as you don't want to advertise it, unfortunately, you do suffer with that. And finally, limit it where you can, take into account the environment, the limitations that you've got with the local environment, etc., etc. We're very fortunate, Barkers, and being part of the Owen Smith Group, we can deliver this to you. We design, manufacture, galvanise, powder coat, and we've got an import division for the fasteners. So the raw material comes into the Stoke-on-Trent site. It is manufactured and dispatched as a finished product to you wherever your particular asset is. And we do able to save on your carbon footprint at least 1 or 2 vehicle movements of sending it to coaters, galvers, etc. So on that note, I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Ian, who will talk about his particular forte.
Cheers, Russell. Thank you very much for that. Cheers, thank you. So we're going to take a little change of tack now, guys, and start to look at some physical security solutions within a smart city environment stroke multifunctional city environment. So cities are growing at a rapid rate, and the population within inside cities are following suit, with up to 68% of the world's population likely to live in cities by 2050. Obviously, cities need to change and accommodate this growth and this potential of overcrowding within city centre infrastructure. So there's been a smart city plan for a number of years now, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that environment looks like and how we, ATG Access, as part of Hill & Smith Security, can assist in helping with smart city developments and protecting smart cities. So what is a smart city? It simply defined, it is a city which incorporates technology such as artificial intelligence, GPS tracking and the Internet of Things. Basically, it's designed for the physical infrastructure to improve public services and spaces and make citizens safer and improve the overall quality of life. Physical security barriers can contribute to the following smart city challenges. We can strategically place things to pedestrianise certain places of the city. We can create traffic calming, reducing congestion, enabling large areas of the city to be used by pedestrians on a multifunctional level. Wants to drive tourism and return of investment in the city. It's something that's become very prevalent under COVID-19 conditions, and we're currently doing a lot of work in various city centres, just Manchester city centre in the UK over the weekend, where a number of streets are being closed off to allow for greater pedestrian permeability, so social distancing can be adhered to once people start to re-enter the cities and the retail and facilities start to reopen. So it's something that needs to be taken into consideration, that when we're getting these people back onto the streets, that they can't just use the sidewalks or the pavements anymore, and to socially distance they'll be walking on the actual carriageways. So we're now installing physical security barriers that are impact tested to allow closure of these streets to protect the public once they're back in this environment. So pedestrianisation can be done temporarily, or it can also be done permanently. We're working on a lot of cityscape schemes where we're looking to pedestrianise key elements of the city centre on a permanent basis to encourage that culture to be outside more and to utilise that city space. These systems can be very intelligent, and they can be installed to restrict vehicle movements to various streets that you want to pedestrianise, high streets, shopping areas, nighttime economy locations. And we can program systems so vehicle movements can be completely restricted. They can operate on certain times of day to allow traffic regulation orders, to allow loading and deliveries and emergency service access into locations for first response vehicles. So there's various different things and different measures that we can put into place, and we can create bespoke software solutions for individual cities to meet their actual needs. All systems installed can carry an impact test rating. All our ATG Access products are tested to PAS 68, IWA 14 or the ASTM standards. So we can actually install systems that are manufactured to meet these standards and provide you with a level of certification and adopt that risk for you. Pedestrian safety is of paramount importance to urban planning and transport departments. It falls hand in hand with greener cities as well, to reduce the air pollution in cities if we're keeping vehicles out of them. So we're all about the physical measures as well as the software behind it to allow the system, the cities to continue to operate as cities and allow access to shops for loading, deliveries. So the city can still function fully, but it's a safer environment for pedestrians to be. Just looking at the UK, it's one of the most congested countries in the world, with almost 38 million vehicles registered on UK roads last year. Associated congestion causes impacts upon commuters' quality of life through longer journey times and increased air pollution. This indicates that current city infrastructure has not evolved enough to cope with the actual volumes of vehicles that are now on the road and the people who commute into cities for work or for pleasure. Smart traffic systems, barriers, bollards, blockers can be installed to ease this traffic congestion, create efficiencies in how vehicles access city centres. So there's a lot of park and ride schemes outside of city centres now where we can control the access of, just allowing certain controlled vehicles into the city centres that can have a harder measure to protect from any kind of security or terrorist threat. Various measures that are implemented can carry vehicle impact ratings, again, providing an additional contribution to that public safety. It's very important that you utilise some of the expertise that are out there to determine what the threat for each individual city and each individual area in that city is. You don't just want to go with a blanket approach to put hardened measures into the city if they are not appropriate. The threat needs to be viable, and the risk assessment and vehicle dynamic assessment should be carried out so you can determine the correct level of protection that the locations need. The idea of a multifunctional city has been around for a while now. The spaces bring a wider spectrum of environmental, social, economic benefits to urban areas, and this is all done through planning and design. And these things take a long time through planning and design, but it's very important to get the security aspect into that planning and design forum from a very early stage. If you try to implement security at a later stage into that urban planning design, it causes a lot of problems. It could affect infrastructure that's under the ground. You may have it difficult to fit product into the correct locations. So getting that equipment into the planning and design early is of vital importance. Like I mentioned earlier, we're currently looking at a lot of COVID-19 situations where we're installing temporary security measures, and these can be deployed for a long period of time or an extremely short period of time. So currently we're deploying these systems with the long-term goal to make these pedestrianised areas permanent, but they've got to go through that planning and design consultation phase. So for 12 months, 18 months periods of time while that is happening, we can close and pedestrianise areas with surface-mounted technology that again is impact tested and certified. A report that was conducted by Smart Cities World found that more than half of respondents identified security as an essential part of any smart city, and it will make them more likely to attend events and mass gatherings. What we've seen change over recent years, since the attacks in London and in Nice and in various locations, the German Christmas markets, is that vehicles or weapon threat is a very prevalent threat, but the public are also now extremely aware of it. And we have seen changes in the industry that I've worked in for the last 20 years, from installing rings of steel in locations to protect people from vehicle attack, to softening and urbanising and hiding hostile vehicle mitigation, right back through full circle to starting to see rings of steel again, and actually putting measures in place at specialist events where the public and the people attending have an idea that they'll be safe from this style of attack. Because what we're seeing is the public are fully aware of these attacks now, and they want to feel safe when they go to these environments. So we're seeing less of a push on the actual drive to blend in the security measures, and more of a push to make the security measures out when we look at temporary event security specifically. Many different types of national infrastructure that sit outside the cities in a number of instances help develop smart and multifunctional cities. So these are the areas that also require protection: transport hubs, data centres, energy storage and distribution, health facilities, smart buildings, to name just a few. So these infrastructure elements that feed into the smart multifunctional cities, they have to have some consideration taken into them, because it's them areas if they come under any kind of attack or stress that would make the smart city environment collapse. So it's not just thinking about the city itself and the people that are attending a city and making it a crowded place. It's protecting that infrastructure that helps deliver the smart city environment. The threat is still prevalent from both vehicles or weapon, which we've seen more recently being the Operation Modi, but also vehicle-borne explosive devices still there as a threat. Obviously, new threats are emerging all the time. One of my concerns and considerations while we're under these unprecedented times at the moment is eventually, hopefully, there will be mass gatherings of people in the future, and it's about how we can protect them people when everybody starts to come out of the houses and stopping social distancing and starts to enjoy life as we're all used to, how we can start to protect people in them types of environments. And hopefully that the eye is not off the ball in this type of threat while everybody's been focusing on recovering and getting through the COVID-19 crisis. But public safety should remain a paramount importance, to not just to urban planners, but to ourselves in the industry, specifiers, CCSAs and the security industry itself. It's possible, and we would advise it, that you look within the area holistically rather than on a building by building basis. Collective security schemes are much more secure and could be more effective in the long run and more cost effective than breaking out individual areas to protect on an asset by asset basis. Determining what your asset is and determining what that threat is of vital importance. Russell touched on the principles of physical security earlier on. And whatever the application really, these principles apply to deter, to detect, to delay, to mitigate and to respond. But obviously, prevention is always better than cure. So thinking as a collective and thinking of your city centre environment or whatever environment you're looking to protect, looking at that holistically with them 5 main principles gives you as many layers as possible to help protect your asset or the people if that is the asset that you're looking to protect. You can look at the H&S Security website for a checklist to allow you to actually determine what you require from a physical security perspective. So you've got to analyse the area in question to assess it for its different uses. No areas are the same. Access is different on a site-by-site basis. There's lots of different stakeholders that are required to be involved in this planning process, and they'll all have different agendas on what they require and what is required for their particular city centre. Obviously, traffic, if you're going to allow traffic into city centres still, or if you want to pedestrianise completely, there's a lot of different things that you need to work through. Planning applications, traffic regulation orders, getting the right advice from CTSAs, counter-terror security advisors, and also independent designers and risk assessors who can provide you with vehicle dynamic assessments and accept risks. But getting the correct advice is absolutely critical. So engaging with those security consultants as early as possible is important, and you can start to define what type of products you require, not only from a level of security perspective, but also from a controllable and buildability perspective within your environment. That's where manufacturers like ourselves can come into play. We can be engaged with you as early as possible to help design your schemes to a threat level that has been determined, and we can offer advice, and we manufacture, design, install, commission and service and maintain all our systems. So you're looking for a partner who can see you through for the next 10, 15 years to give you that best value, as opposed to someone that you're just going to buy products off the shelf from. We design a lot of bespoke solutions for a lot of clients. We take them right through to impact testing to achieve PAS 68, IWA 14 or AF10 certification. And that's from early engagement with stakeholders, which is a real key advantage to utilising ATG Access and Hill & Smith. But your ears to the ground, and a lot of advice that's there available for you is free from the police, from the counter-terror security advisors, and they can be a real good first point of call when you're trying to determine what your threat is to a particular location. This slide just gives you the overview of who Hill & Smith Security are now. So it's made up of ourselves, ATG Access, Barker's Fencing, which is Russell, who you've heard of, Berry Systems, Technicover, Parking Facilities, Hard Staff and Brystorm. So we cover all perimeter securities, temporary security, entrance control, building hardening, installation and project management right across the board. So we really are a group of companies now who form HS Security that can service all your needs. And with that, I will pass back over to James from IFSEC. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you to everyone there. Some really great insight from you all, and I'm sure our attendees listening felt the same. We're going to move on to our Q&A section now, but just quickly before we begin, if I could direct your attention to our webinar survey, which is available on the right of the presentation window. If you close the survey, you can reopen the widget by clicking the icon along the bottom of your screen. Thanks very much in advance for filling out the feedback form, and I'd also like you to direct your attention to the resources section once again, where you can find some really useful links related to this topic, as well as the IFSEC Digital Week homepage. And now we'll move on to the question and answer portion of our event. I know we've had a couple come in already, which is great, but please feel free to ask any questions you can. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located to the right of the presentation window, or simply click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If we're not able to answer all the submitted questions during today's webinar, we'll be sure to share them with the speakers after the event. And as I mentioned, if you have a question for a specific individual or company, please make this clear within the question. Right, let's have a look at the questions that have come in. I think, Richard, we'll start with one for you, if that's okay.
Yep.
We have witnessed some of your live testing at IFSEC previously and found it to be fascinating. Given the current circumstances, are BRE still able to conduct security testing?
At distance, but not distance from the product, I might add. The product very much gets close and personal with our testers. Yeah, we are able to, although sadly, whereas most of our testing historically has actually been conducted by our experienced technicians at manufacturers' own sites to help them through the process quicker, they can make modifications, etc. in the factory. We're not currently able to do that. Hopefully that will change as policies get amended, and also our guys aren't currently flying around the world on jets to do the testing on site. But in the meantime, we're certainly carrying on doing a lot of testing at BRE.
Fantastic, good to hear. One coming here from Chris Stevens. I think I'll sort of put this out to the panel. How does the panel expect investment in security measures to be impacted as the country comes out of lockdown and after the effects of COVID-19? If I pass over to Russell, for example, first, and then you can pass on to anyone else who'd like to add something.
It's a very difficult one because we're all going to feel the costs, and we've just out of austerity, and the government are trying to invest in projects such as HS2. I think it's going to be very difficult, but they've still got to invest in the infrastructure and the protection of the CNI. So it's a balancing act. I do think funding will be available. I'm not sure what other people on the panel think.
From my perspective, from my perspective, I think because of this is critical national infrastructure, the investment, as I was saying with Russell, is always going to be there because it's needed. It's an essential part of ensuring that the country can maintain its operational sort of facilities and ensure that we can keep sort of being confident day to day and moving around. I don't think it's an optional thing, but obviously the funding has got to, like Russell said, it's going to be a very difficult time, but I don't necessarily see much change in the investment in the CNI side of the world.
If I can add to that, this is Richard here. If I think about the situation we face, and certainly I think this is one around the world, though there are many people who currently aren't working. In the UK, we have furlough schemes. In other countries, might do other things. We're seeing mass unemployment. A lot of people finding themselves out of work, potentially feeling disillusioned and having more time on their hands. There's certainly a risk of further polarisation, and we've seen a lot of signs of that in recent years. So there's a chance that those sort of people are going to be stirred up by those with hostile intent who'll get hold of them in their homes, etc., via the internet. So we need to be very alert to this. Governments in past recessions, etc., have often invested in infrastructure as a way to kickstart economies, and I'd very much welcome that in this one. There is more we need to do. We've heard about smart cities, etc. There's a lot of work in the UK and other countries around the world to improve on our infrastructure, and that is a great way of investing and stimulating economies. But at the same time, we need to do so to protect against those who sadly have become disillusioned and may want to take it out on others.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. I think there's a couple of questions asking if the slides will be available after this. Just to add, I think I did say it earlier, and I'll say it again, that we'll have an on-demand webinar link available shortly after, 24 hours maybe after this webinar. So you'll be able to view it all again and view the slides in your own time, so you can read through them properly. We've got a question here come in from Warren Tilbrook. If I come to you, Russell, for this one, firstly, what are the views of the panel on finite element analysis and computer modelling to evaluate the performance of products rather than destructive testing, such as crash-rated vehicle security barriers?
As a business, Barkers have looked at doing this type of work, but we've found, especially as we move out of the UK, we're coming across companies that have got desktop modelling, various reports saying that it meets this, that and the other, but there's no credibility behind it. The beauty of the testing that we have done and HS Security have done, all of their products have got written reports that back up what we've done. We experience, certainly as we go out towards the Middle East and Asia, there's a lot of companies that claim that they've done modelling, claim that they've done the desktop analysis, but they haven't got the paperwork to back it up. So that will be a difficult one. It would have to be accredited, similar to what the LPCB do, but I don't know. Richard, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, we actually years ago were involved in some work looking at potential finite element analysis-based standards for vehicle barriers, and it quickly became evident from the work that was funded by certain organisations, government-led organisations, that even on a basic gas pipe, it was very difficult to model to a reliable level. And I know at the time there was talk in Europe of having a finite element analysis-based standard for vehicle barriers that soon became dismissed because of the sheer complexity of what's trying to be done. Now, we are almost 20 years on from that, and finite element analysis might have improved somewhat. However, there are a lot of variables, and you've got to ask yourselves, who has verified that finite element analysis model? If it's not being verified, then how do you verify it? Well, you verify it by taking data points and by testing it. So testing remains important, and at the moment I'm still to be proven otherwise of how reliable they are. By all means, use it as an early rule of thumb, but maybe at this point I'll pass on to John, because I'm sure his CAD team will do a lot of finite work before they give us samples. What's your thoughts, John?
Yes, we do use finite element analysis to a degree, but that's based on, as Richard says, on just the concept work that we carry out. We can mimic previous products that have been tested because we get full test reports, but again, without having that control element of a physical test to understand that the dynamic impacts, whether they are from vehicles or whether they are from physical attack teams, you have to understand that the dynamics change on every single product and every single point of attack. So what we've carried out finite element analysis on things such as material grades and understanding how things will flex and bend and react when under a fixed pressure load, to understand how products will react when sort of levered or when impacted. But it still doesn't give us that complete confidence that a physical test will give us to understand that we use finite element analysis in the conceptual work and the design work to understand we're somewhere near, to create a cost-effective solution, to try and be as close to a fully engineered proposal. But we have to test it. We have to have that reassurance that when actually applied, it does what it says on the tin, for want of a better description. And I think there's a place for both, but I think it's more the FEA is at the very front end of a design project. And like I said, we use it on the CAD teams and with our 3D modelling. We run all sorts, but until we get that physical test at the end of it, I wouldn't be able to say that the data on the screen is 100% correct without that test as a guarantee on the product that's being provided.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And sort of another one here for Richard, actually. How widely do you think the LPS 1175 standard is recognised, and used?
I wish I knew. I do the odd Google search because I'm boring like that, other search engines do exist. We know at the moment, and certainly in the last few years, as people around the world become aware of it and what it offers, and certainly with issue 8, which offers so many more options, as John went through quite well, we're seeing people pick it up really quickly. And it seems the limit seems to be people's knowledge of it. Once they know about it and they know that they can cover all aspects of a layer, for example, the whole of the perimeter to one standard, and then the next layer being the building envelope, and within the building to one single standard against common measures. So they define the threat in terms of tools and things. It's spreading, and we've recently done work in Dubai. That John alluded to this stuff in Oman and other parts of the Middle East. We've seen the standard used in Australia, in America, even in Washington. And I think on the map I've started marking up with pins. Paraguay and Uruguay were recent additions to that. So they're not necessarily recognised at national level, but certainly when individual specifiers, risk managers get hold of it, they tend to start to recognise it quite quickly.
Excellent. So sort of going across the world as it grows, really, and as the recognition comes. One question here I'll direct to yourself, John, if that's okay. Do you foresee the terror threat changing as a result of changing behaviours driven by COVID-19?
I think this sort of is covered a little bit by Richard's earlier statement around that there's a section that may well become more susceptible to being sort of disillusioned, and I don't think the final threats will change, that the vehicle-borne or the physical attack methodologies that are being sort of protected against now will change much, but I do see that there may be a spike in certain areas of what's the correct sort of term I'm looking for, in the mindsets of people. The people are quite vulnerable, as Richard said earlier. There's a lot of isolation and things like that going on, and there's a concern for myself and obviously Richard as well from his side of things that people could be they're more susceptible to being influenced in a negative way. But the end result of that influence will still be, I believe, the elements that we've seen on the slides of physical attacks and such things as vehicle-borne and hostile mitigating, those sort of things that will continue to be the current threat. I don't think COVID-19 is going to make any major changes to those actual physical elements that are the threat to the general public.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just to let everyone know who is listening, all the speakers' bios are on the webinar console for you. The contact information there goes straight to myself, but if there are any questions that you want to direct further, just send an email to there, and I will forward it on to the speakers. I think we've got time for one more question, so I'm happy for everyone to pitch on this, really. I'll come to you first, though, Russell. How do you think security schemes can be future-proofed in cities?
In cities?
Yes.
That's one really. It's a shame Ian has had to go, because that was one that Ian would be able to answer very clearly. Future-proofing is very, very difficult, because as I've been involved in this industry now for just over 20-odd years, and it is amazing how the people who are trying to protect us and look after us seem to know what's coming well in advance of us. And the threat that's been perceived, we've developed products to cope with that particular threat that's coming along. So I genuinely don't know how to future-proof for cities, because basically the products that are out there now, as Ian did in his informative presentation, there is so many products that you can now use to make a city centre safe. I genuinely don't know. Over to you guys. Anybody else pick that one up?
No problem. I just thought I'll add, obviously Ian has had to go, unfortunately, unless he has been able to jump back in, but I can always put it to him separately after this as well, and we can put together an article in IFSEC Global, so anyone interested, keep an eye out for that. Richard or John, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Go on, Richard.
I was just going to say, yeah, future-proofing is quite hard. We have to do it with the LPS standard. We're always looking at the horizon and sort of what will influence the threat. And in the work we're doing, that becomes tool availability. And part of that is tools are developed by manufacturers who are trying to help construction companies, etc., build buildings or demolish buildings far more efficiently. So certainly being mindful that things will always move on, and going back to the triangle, thinking what that response is, not just looking at the delay measures and the detection measures, but the response. And my concern is hostile actors will be looking to use techniques, like we saw at Gatwick Airport with the drones and things like that, and other cities around the world have seen it. They're going to try and catch us out with things that we've not caught up with, that are very hard to respond to. So we need to be mindful of that when we're designing buildings and cities. Are we building risk in? Are we creating opportunities with that?
Absolutely. Right, I think that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, but thank you so much for sharing all your expertise on this subject, Richard, John, Russell and Ian. It really is appreciated, and thanks for sharing your time with us today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for your attendance and participation this afternoon, and we hope you enjoyed the session. And a massive thank you to our headline sponsor for the day, Hanwha Techwin. Within the next 24 hours, you should receive a personalised follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Please feel free to invite your colleagues who may not have been able to available to listen to the event, as they can still register to listen even after this week. And be sure to head over to our Digital Week homepage, which you can find a link for in the resources section, which is full of product launches and exclusive white papers and webinars from businesses across the industry. You can also follow all the latest by searching the hashtag IFSECDigital on social media. From this page, you'll also find the link to sign up to tomorrow morning's IFSEC webinar, where we'll be covering the security challenges that come with the Internet of Things. James Willison, Saab Sembi and Nick Morgan will all be offering their expert views. And in the afternoon, we'll be hearing from the Intelligent Building Europe team on what's next for smart buildings. Later on in the week, we've got key speakers from the fire safety industry, as well as the facilities management sector too. And just to add to this, IFSEC, FireX and Skills for Security have come together to host a week of free security and fire protection training from the 22nd to the 25th of June. Leading professionals will host a session a day focused on a variety of key areas, so do keep an eye out for this after Digital Week. And don't forget to follow IFSEC Global on social media to keep up to date with all the latest in the industry. That's all from us. Thanks for your time and thanks to the speakers once again. Have a great day everyone and keep safe.